Okay.
I introduced myself earlier, but I'm Sarah Middle, and I'm working with Elton, Maria and Dan on the Pelagios Open Societal Challenges project. In particular, I'm using the new Recogito to annotate museums' collections data with the aim of drawing out narratives and visualising object itineraries. So I'm going to briefly introduce the project that I've worked on previously and then provide an update on my work so far with a bit of a preview of the new Recogito. So my involvement with Pelagios started when I was doing my PhD with Elton at the Open University, which I completed nearly 2 years ago. My research comprised a survey of over 200 ancient world researchers on their use and production of digital tools and resources, where I focused on linked data, and that was complemented by in-depth interviews with 16 of these participants. My findings really emphasised the importance of communicating with users, so both during development and after publication, to ensure that linked ancient world data, tools and resources are usable to researchers without specialist technical skills. My key recommendations related to collaboration, openness, transparency, extensibility, sustainability and community building. These themes are more broadly applicable across humanities disciplines and hopefully bringing them into the Pelagios OSC work that we're doing. I then went on to work as a postdoctoral researcher on the Tools of Knowledge project, for which I was based at National Museums Scotland. So this was an AHRC funded project, ran between January 2021 and December last year, and it aimed at further understanding of the scientific instrument trade between 1550 and 1914 using digital methods. At the core of the project was the conversion of a legacy access database, which was called SIMON, Scientific Instrument Makers Observations and Notes. And this provided detailed biographical information about scientific instrument makers during this period, but it was not readily accessible to or usable by the majority of researchers. It was held on a computer at National Museums Greenwich. We remodeled the database to a linked open data structure using a bespoke events-based ontology called Simian, the Scientific Instrument Makers and Events Ontology, and the resulting dataset is currently in the process of being published using Arches. Alongside this work, we also produced a white paper on the topic of infrastructures for linked humanities data, which was written collaboratively with participants of LinkPass 2022 and other members of the Pelagios community, and there's a link on the slide there. So one area of the project that we would have liked to explore in more depth was the topic of object itineraries. And these are the journeys that cultural heritage objects take through space and time. An object's itinerary consists of a sequence of events, including creation, use, alteration, movement and acquisition, and may ultimately lead to its decay or destruction. It might also look back to the formation of materials from which the object was constructed, or it might look forward to future receptions or remediations. Each of these events occurs in a given place at a given time and often involves the actions of a person or organisation. A few years ago, some of us here took part in the Institute of Ancient Itineraries, thanks Stuart, a Getty-funded programme which was led by King's College London, and we explored how object itineraries might be represented using linked data technologies. While we started to apply these ideas in Tools of Knowledge, I'm hoping to take this a little bit further in the Pelagios OSC project using new Recogito. So in the current phase of the project, I'm conducting a pilot study into the use of new Recogito for annotating museums' collections data with the aim of using it to construct object itineraries and to investigate the impact that this might have on the use of data for storytelling to diverse museum audiences. The dataset I'm using is a sample of collections data from National Museums Scotland. This comprises metadata about nearly 400 navigational instruments of different types, and predominantly from the 19th and early 20th centuries. They include sextants, quadrants, compasses and astrolabes, many of which played a crucial role in exploration and survey expeditions with links to imperial expansion and colonialism. So therefore they have many different stories to tell. While the collections management system at NMS facilitates the representation of the kind of fundamental information about these objects as structured data, a lot of their richer stories are contained in unstructured fields, such as, for example, research notes, descriptions, previous exhibitions, labels. And it's these unstructured fields that I'm focusing on for the annotation work that I'm doing with new Recogito. I should also say at this point that not all museums' collections management systems will contain this type of information. Different institutions have different procedures for storing and managing unstructured data, which might mean that it's kept separately from the more structured catalogue data, in which case any annotation would have to take place on the separate files rather than the catalogue data itself. And so I started by analysing the information contained in the NMS dataset with the aim of producing an ontology for representing object itineraries. However, it soon became clear that I was basically just reinventing CDOC CRM. As usability is key to this project, and a lot of work has already been done on CDOC CRM usability by the Linked Art initiative, I decided to instead create a data model that uses Linked Art compliant CDOC CRM with selected terms from the Linked Art ontology. The model in its current state is shown on the slide, but it's likely to be developed further as I uncover more detailed information during the annotation process. And now, to follow Elton's presentation on old Recogito, I'm going to introduce new Recogito. So for those of you who are familiar with old Recogito, its new incarnation has been reimagined and it has been more stripped back in places. I'm going to give you a bit of a run through using examples from the work that I've been doing on the Pelagios OSC project. So one of the ways in which new Recogito differs from old Recogito is the more advanced collaboration functionality, which Elton mentioned earlier. So annotation takes place within the context of projects, where multiple users can be assigned to the same project with the potential for them to work collaboratively on the same collection of documents. Projects can be public, so they're viewable to all users of Recogito, or they can be restricted only to members of that particular project. And then within a project, project administrators have the option to assign tasks or documents to other members of their project team. Documents then sit within the particular project, and then they're viewable and annotatable by all members of that project. Currently, you can only import documents as a TXT file and export annotations on them as a CSV. So from this document screen, you have the option to export all the annotations from all documents in that project, or you can choose to only export annotations from a particular document. And then when you open a document, you're ready to annotate. So this looks a little bit different from old Recogito. It's a bit more like a Word or Google document that you add comments on. Annotations are created by highlighting a word or phrase, and that brings up this annotation pop-up. So similarly, again to old Recogito, you have the option of writing a free text comment, which might incorporate hyperlinks, images or videos, or you can add one or more tags. So again, you can add anything you want a tag to start off with, but once you've entered the tag, it will remember it, so it will incorporate autocomplete next time you start to type it. You can also configure the settings for your project to use a predefined tag set so that your existing tags can appear in the autocomplete, but then you can also add new tags as well. So for example, I might use entities from the data model that I showed in my previous slide, and then supplement these with new tags during the annotation process to build up a list of object types or materials, for example. Annotations are public by default, but that just means that they're public to whoever can access the document. So that might well just be other members of the project team, unless the project itself is kind of public. You also have the option to make your annotations private, so they're only viewable to you as an individual user.
And ask, you said, so you can kind of set up a predefined annotation schema. Can you make that closed set so that it's not possible to add others alongside, or is it always that option?
Not at the moment, no. It's it just kind of helps to sort of pre-populate the system, but it doesn't take away the functionality of being able to add the new tags to it. Although that could be quite handy if you had a lot of people working on something, you wanted to keep it controlled.
Yeah, sometimes you really do want a closed set.
Yeah.
Not allowing people to go outside it.
So new Recogito has some really helpful features for viewing the annotations that have been made on a particular document. And this is some of the heavy annotation that Elton was talking about earlier on. So you can view your annotations in a pane that's shown on the right hand side of the screen, and from there you can also edit or delete individual annotations. So by default, the text that has been annotated appears with a pale blue highlight, which is not massively helpful when you've done loads and loads of annotations, but it is possible to apply colour coding to make it easier for example, linking people to VIAP or object types to the AAT. And in terms of next steps for this part of the project, once I've finished annotating my sample of objects in New Recogito, I plan to export the data and visualize it in Pelagios and testing out the workflow of moving between these two different Pelagios tools and potentially to increase the scope and flexibility for how the object itineraries might be represented. As part of the work, I'd also potentially like to extend the data model that I showed earlier to include entities that can be important components of object itineraries, but which are not currently included in the established cultural heritage ontologies that I've used as my foundation. So, for example, historical events in particular, such as expedition, voyage, and war. I'd also like to look at developing workflows for how the annotations, along with more structured components of the collections data, might be converted to RDF using existing freely available tools. This might have to be a future project. And as Maria and Sarah will be talking about later on, we're going to be doing some research into how the new Recogito might be used by cultural heritage professionals. Thank you.